fall of Baghdad in 1258 marks a pivotal moment in history, representing not just the collapse of a city, but a significant shift in power that challenged the notion of Mongol invincibility. The Mongols, under the command of Hulagu Khan, launched a brutal siege on Baghdad, the heart of the Islamic Golden Age and the Abbasid Caliphate. This event is significant not just for its immediate destruction, but for how it symbolized the limitation of Mongol expansion and dominance, one that had until then seemed unstoppable. By overtaking Baghdad, the Mongols effectively dismantled one of the major intellectual and cultural centers of the world, demonstrating their military prowess. However, the subsequent challenges they faced highlighted their vulnerabilities and heralded the beginning of a decline in their perceived invincibility. Examples of this shift can be found in the aftermath of the siege. One specific illustration is the Battle of Ain Jalut in 1260, where the Mamluks defeated the Mongols in modern-day Israel. This victory, one of the first major setbacks for the Mongols, undermined the idea of their unstoppable force and indicated that their expansion could indeed be halted. Furthermore, the Mongols' relationship with Europe also soured as alliances that were once considered began to fracture when their image of invincibility started to wane. These events reveal how the fall of Baghdad was more than mere conquest. It was a turning point that dictated diplomatic and military dynamics far beyond the Islamic world. Scholars and historians often view the fall of Baghdad as an example of the limits of military might without sustainable governance. While the Mongols excelled in conquest, they struggled to maintain long-term control over vast territories, especially those requiring intricate administration and cultural integration. However, some historians argue that the Mongol Empire's influence was not solely reliant on military prowess, but also on their adaptability and integration, elements they evidently mismanaged in certain regions. The fall of Baghdad and the decline of Mongol invincibility echo the broader theme of the impermanence of empires, influencing how empires are viewed both historically and in contemporary discourses on power. This transition also highlights the interconnectivity of political, cultural, and military forces, demonstrating how one event can reverberate through different spheres, altering trajectories of nations and reshaping world history. The reality that even the most dominant forces can falter prompts reflection on current global powers and their potential vulnerabilities, reminding us of the cyclical nature of history. The period from 1258 to 1260 marks a critical transition in world history, underscored by two monumental events: the fall of Baghdad and the beginning of the decline of Mongol invincibility. The fall of Baghdad in 1258 occurred when the Mongols, led by Hulagu Khan, seized the city, effectively ending the Islamic Golden Age and the Abbasid Caliphate's dominance. This event is significant, as it symbolizes the peak of Mongol expansion, showcasing their unmatched military prowess at the time. Baghdad was a bastion of culture, knowledge, and power, and its capture demonstrated the Mongols' capability to dismantle empires. However, this period also marks the beginning of the end of the notion of Mongol invincibility. Despite their successes, the Mongols faced significant setbacks shortly after the conquest of Baghdad. A pivotal moment was the Battle of Ain Jalut in 1260, where the Mamluks successfully repelled a Mongol advance into the Levant. This battle is frequently cited as the first substantial defeat of the Mongol army, proving that they were not invincible and that their rapid expansion could be halted. The significance of these events lies in their transformative impact on global politics and culture. The fall of Baghdad led to the fragmentation of the Islamic world, setting the stage for new powers like the Ottomans. Similarly, the Mongol defeat at Ain Jalut inspired other nations and forces to resist Mongol advances more fervently. One real-world example of these events' significance is the preservation and continuation of Islamic culture by the Mamluks in Egypt, despite the Mongol threat. Another example is the emergence of new trade routes and political alliances as former Mongol territories sought to stabilize and assert independence over time. Challenging this narrative of Mongol invincibility's decline, some historians argue that the Mongol state did not immediately lose power, but instead adapted by integrating with local cultures, exemplified by the Ilkhanat's subsequent embrace of Islam in Persia. These shifts indicate that the Mongol legacy persisted in altered forms. The fall of Baghdad and the early signs of Mongol vulnerability catalyzed shifts in power dynamics, influencing the rise of new empires and cultural exchanges. These events connect with broader themes of conquest, cultural transformation, and the enduring human struggle for autonomy and resilience in the face of seemingly unstoppable forces. The Mongol expansion and strategy before 1258 was characterized by a rapid, unrelenting series of conquests and strategic innovations that allowed the Mongols to build one of the largest empires in history. At the heart of their expansion were highly disciplined and mobile cavalry units, a sophisticated system of communication using relay stations, and an ability to adapt and incorporate elements from the cultures they conquered. This expansion and strategy laid the groundwork for their broader historical influence, leading up to the pivotal moments between 1258 and 1260, when their perceived invincibility was challenged. The significance of Mongol expansion before 1258 in relation to the fall of Baghdad and the Mongol invincibility lies in its establishment of a powerful and seemingly unstoppable force. The reputation of the Mongols as invincible warriors made their eventual setbacks all the more dramatic, highlighting the eventual limits of their empire. Two specific examples underscore this point. First, the Mongols' conquest of China exemplifies their strategic prowess. They effectively used siege warfare and psychological tactics to overcome the fortified cities of the Song dynasty. Second, the defeat of the Khwarezmian Empire demonstrates their adaptability and relentless pursuit, as the Mongols chased the fleeing Shah and systematically dismantled his support network. Opinions supporting the idea of Mongol strategic brilliance often emphasize their innovative military tactics and the use of psychological warfare to instill fear, thus minimizing actual confrontation. Scholars frequently cite the leadership of Genghis Khan and later Ögedei Khan as critical to the Mongols' ability to manage such a vast and culturally diverse empire. However, challenges and controversies surround this concept. Critics argue that the Mongol tactics also relied heavily on brutal massacres and the spread of terror, leading to significant loss of life and cultural heritage. Alternative viewpoints highlight that some of the empire's more sophisticated logistical practices were borrowed from conquered peoples, suggesting that their strategy was not entirely original, but rather an amalgamation of various influences. The expansion and strategy of the Mongols before 1258 are intrinsically linked to their subsequent perception as invincible. The fall of Baghdad and perceived vulnerability in later years can be attributed to overextension and the internal challenges of governing a diverse empire. These developments underscore the shifting balance of power and the eventual recalibration of regional dynamics in the face of Mongol decline. The fall of Baghdad in 1258 marked a pivotal moment in history, signaling both the dramatic end of the Abbasid Caliphate's centuries-long reign and the beginning of the end for the perceived invincibility of the Mongol Empire. The Mongol siege of Baghdad, led by Hulagu Khan, resulted in the city's catastrophic destruction, the death of the last Abbasid Caliph, and widespread devastation, effectively ending Baghdad's role as a major Islamic cultural and intellectual center. This event not only reshaped the Middle Eastern landscape, but also challenged the notion of Mongol supremacy, which had dominated Eurasian geopolitics up to that point. The significance of the fall of Baghdad cannot be understated. It represented a shift in the locus of power within the Islamic world and highlighted the destructive force of the Mongols, transforming them from conquerors into occupiers. However, it also exposed vulnerabilities within the Mongol forces, foreshadowing their eventual decline. The Mongol invasion stretched their resources thin and underscored the limits of their expansionist capabilities, challenging their aura of invincibility. Two significant examples illustrate this turning point. First, the siege of Baghdad itself demonstrated the martial prowess of the Mongols, but also their ruthless efficiency in dealing with opposition, which ironically sowed the seeds of their downfall by overextending their reach and exhausting their military resources. Second, the subsequent defeat of a Mongol army at the hands of the Mamluks in the Battle of Ain Jalut in 1260 portrayed a stark contrast to their earlier victories and clearly showed that Mongol forces could be defeated, marking the decline of their feared image. Opinions on this topic vary. Some historians argue that the fall of Baghdad was a lesson in the dangers of overexpansion, while others praise the Mongols for unifying diverse regions under one system, albeit temporarily. Critics may point out that while the Mongols' martial tactics were revolutionary, their approach led to unnecessary cultural destruction and loss of life, questioning the long-term sustainability of their empire. Challenges and controversies around this topic include debates over the cultural implications of the Mongol invasions and the long-term effects on the Islamic world, as well as differing perspectives on how history should judge the Mongol Empire's contributions versus its destructiveness. Ultimately, the fall of Baghdad and the subsequent fall in Mongol invincibility are intertwined, showcasing the broader historical processes of empire building and decline. They illustrate how the overextension of power invariably leads to vulnerabilities, influencing modern understanding of military strategy and geopolitical dynamics. These events are a reminder of how sweeping changes can redefine cultural and political landscapes, contributing to the diverse and interconnected history we study today.